Hello, people of New World. Happy Friday. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. Today, I want to give you the top 10 things you will notice right away in New World when you come back. Whether you are a player who has returned, is contemplating a return, or is currently playing, these, in my opinion, are the 10 things you're going to notice right away. So I just want to give you that insight in case some of you are taking some of your Turkey Day time off to play some New World or give it another shot. Before we get started, hit the things down below. We have our Madrinas link, 20% off at checkout if you use code Lamani, all caps. We are wanting to make a weekly clips sort of community video. So if you want to submit your clips for that, there's a Google form down below. Otherwise, Discord, Twitter, Twitch, all that stuff is there too. And if you want, please do that weird YouTube stuff like comment, subscribe, ring the bell, tell everybody you know. I'd really appreciate it. Now let's get into the video. Okay, I know this is kind of a generic and baseline thing, but I think the biggest thing I noticed is I went to a fresh start server right away when I was playing again. And the questing experience is so much better. The fact that they changed, honestly, and this is a hot take, but they changed town boards to not just be the boosting meta and you kind of quest and it's faster to quest. You'll notice it's definitely faster, but the experiences you go through while questing are completely different. Every zone that you go to in the early days is completely different. It's revamped. There's new enemy types. The buildings and zones look new. Like for those of you who remember, you'd go to the old man on the little bend in Windsward for part of the main story. That whole area is different. There's this intense quest line where you feel like you're James Bonding through all these beams. I'll put it in the background while I'm talking. Everything is different. Even picking your faction. I didn't pick a faction until I'm almost 30 right now in the main story quests. And even doing that is so much of a more epic experience. I'm climbing up to a hill. It's got this whole, like, I went green on this guy. It's got this whole like pit of pirate people fighting, and then you got to do some quests for them, come back up. It's a little bit annoying to like go up and down this hill, but it's genuinely a better experience. And I can say that for every quest that you do, even for all of you enjoyers of healing and you've tried to farm slivers of consecrated iron back in the day, and you'd go in the Forge Smith, that area and the Forge Smith himself, again, completely different, really interesting, and just unique. It's breathtaking, to be honest with you. The night and day difference of what questing, and don't get me wrong, obviously there's still a lot of things they can do to optimize it or make it better in general, but what you experience now as a new player or somebody who's returning for a fresh start is life-changing, quite honestly. It's better for the fresh start experience. It's better to really see when you're wanting to go fresh. Just a better feel. Your leveling feels faster, it feels more fun, and it feels more enjoyable and engaging. So I would highly recommend, even if you don't want to hit 60 on another character to play, just at least see what it's like for the first like 20 levels or so to see the directionality of the game. And you can see that across in another point that I'm going to talk about. If you look at that and now you look at what they're doing with the new zone in Brimstone Sands and how they're starting to change up these experiences. There's cutscenes, there's dialogue, there's things happening is the biggest thing for me. And it is a 10 out of 10 experience compared to what we have experienced in the past. Okay, point number 2, I talked about it, but Brimstone Sands. So with Brimstone Sands, we also have a new weapon. And then another thing I want to just touch on is there are some weapon changes. For instance, you can see I have a video on the channel about throwing hatchets. Hatchets throw way faster, and the throwing side is way different. And they changed some points in there just because everything is at a faster pace, so it's more of a DPS build that you would like to actually use. But then things too that they're doing, like Bow has a new ability, you have an explosive arrow. They changed that. So there's new things that are coming, new things that have changed, and then we have the whole brand new weapon, that being the Greatsword. But now let's talk about the zone. Brimstone Sands is breathtakingly beautiful. I know I said that about the leveling experience as well, but there's things like a giant killer worm that's swimming around that I didn't even know was there until the second time I went there. The zone looks beautiful. The enemy types are completely different. There's just a unique experience there. When you're a player that's sat there at level 60 the entire time, and if you haven't touched fresh or anything, it is so nice to just see the direction the game is heading. You see, obviously at surface level, we have Brimstone Sands. There's new quests, new things are happening. But then you start to dive into the nuances of things like, okay, now we're going around, we have to collect all these runes so we can open up some special chests. And then you start to go and there's some scorpions walking around and you step on the scorpion and it pops. There's all kinds of new crafting materials out there, like all the cacti you can farm. But when you look at it at surface level, you're like, okay, new zone after a year, whatever. But you start to see the layers of this new zone and the direction that it points to in the future of what they're going to do. Even I'm crawling around and I'm doing some of the quests out there, and now I'm teleporting through these portals as part of my main story quest. Or I go up and I have to do a jumping puzzle and there's these goats that knock you down every time. And there's a lot of hidden things. And I think it just says that one, the zone looks good. Two, the content in there feels so much better. And three, they are starting to upgrade the mechanics of the game now that we have a better baseline. Or it speaks volumes about what is going to come. So it's a big thing to be excited about. All right, next, this is a real quick one, Trading Post. For all of you people who have struggled through the Trading Post, here's what I'm going to say. The filtering is incredible. I can go by min price and max price if you're trying to snipe mats. I can sit here and not only look at 590 plus gear for things that you would actually want to use. I can sort it by, let's say I want to go strength split gear, or I can just go pure strength gear, or I can sort it by any perk. I can search the perk, right? So like, let's say I want refreshing. Boom, refreshing is there. And let's say I want refreshing, divine embrace. I don't have to search just anyone that has these. I can now search only things that have this and maybe focus. And I only want focus split ones. Looks like there's nothing there, but it is such a cleaner, faster and optimized system. And even selling too, for those of you who like to clear out their storage chests and you would sell like something down here. Let me show you. Let's just say I'm just going to put one of these on the market just so it's easy for all of you to see. Whatever this comes out of as base. And you remember the days of when it would pop you back up to the top? No longer there. So just Trading Post is clean. Okay, so the next quick thing is salvage changes. And this might not sound super big to all of you, but you now have all these different salvaging components. You'll have infused scraps of all different varieties. And if you've watched my past video, you can turn these into gypsum orbs. You can sell the legendary ones on the Trading Post. These you can turn into crafting XP. If you have something maxed out, this can just translate to direct aptitude, or you can pull crafting materials like things for your daily crafts, such as orichalcum ingots out of the purple ones, or use the legendary ones to get things like Asmodeum. But now in general, with salvaging, you can get better salvages. So you can get more gold, more materials. They've added in a new thing called materia. So if I were to salvage something from Tempest Heart, you now see I get Tempest materia. That allows me to, if I were going to just have really bad luck, I can now get enough where I can craft something specific from Tempest. You also then have just the potential in general, if you're salvaging anything, to get some of these components. I didn't pull any from that, but it is a small chance. And then the other thing is too, there you go. There's one, that's how it looks now. You also get umbral shards when you get better ones, again, more gold. And it's really nice. Let's say I have something, we'll do these ones. Just because you now get that pop-up like, hey, you got runic leather from this. So there's that when you do things that you actually crafted. It's just nicer, you get more out of it, and it feels genuinely better to salvage. All right, next thing is crafting changes. And there's a bunch here, but one, I want to show you batch crafting is in. So if I were just to do this and craft a bunch of stuff, remember the days of when you're leveling up armoring and you craft 1,000 pairs of gloves and you're just sitting there? Well, now we can do it just like this. And if I want to, I can now salvage all of them just like that. And it tells me exactly what I get. I think this is the greatest thing I've ever seen in terms of crafting in this game. So that's thing one. The other thing I want to talk about is some crafting different things, but you now have options for instance, with some of the new crafting things like a runestone stopwatch. And this links to the stone cutting table. You can craft this every day, and this functions as if it were a timeless shard, and it goes 598 to 600 when you're crafting geared. So every day you can craft these, you get a little bit of a bonus with your stone cutting that you can essentially just get these free crafts off. You do have to use some of these new infused armor fragments, which aren't that expensive, but it rolls as if it were con, so you don't actually have to put any sort of attribute in, and it rolls like it's a timeless shard. So all you do is roll perk, and boom, it'll just start rolling everything for you. So at the end of the week, you can go through and do your gambles. It's a really nice system. Another thing in the game is these golden scarabs, and these function a little bit differently. What you do is you pair these with 3 timeless shards, but then what it does, and a bunch of actual attribute things, like 50 of them, but what it does, or 25, and what it does is it allows you to pick 2 perks. So if you're really just like not wanting to spend the money, and you want to just go for it and get your one, at least 2 of the 3 perks that you're wanting in a piece of gear, you can force craft a 2 perk. So like if you're a healer trying to get a rapier or any sort of offhand that you're just like, screw it, I'm not going to sit here and roll them the whole time, you can just pop a scarab. It's a little bit more of an expensive way to do it, and you get the guaranteed 2 perk plus your attribute of whatever you choose. So they've definitely done some crafting changes in that sense as well. And if you start to look at more crafting, like then we have our heart runes, which I didn't even mention the new brimstone stuff, but You also have all of these new crafting recipes, like for the new gems. There's a whole rune glass system where you have to go out to this certain area in Brimstone to then craft rune glass using runes that you can farm. And then these gems do something completely different. I'm going to have a dedicated section here for all the gems and the rune glass stuff. But it's just nice and refreshing to see that they completely reworked how stone cutting kind of functioned. If you remember, these were just for making tuning orbs, which are gone. Now you use them for these runestone stopwatches, which kind of play an integral part in the game because rolling was so important. So I think it's really interesting what they're doing here and showing that they can completely rework a trade skill and still get value out of it. And they're starting to integrate new systems like, all right, we're just going to change up the gem game because we're going to add in essentially like a brand new trade skill. So overall with crafting, there's definitely some significant differences. Then you start to notice, okay, what other patterns are out there? What other cooking recipes are new? Because there are new cooking recipes. There's all sorts of new materials. So get out there, observe, see for your own eyes, but it's nice and refreshing to see. Okay, so on the topic of, crafting changes, but I want to talk all these rune glass gems. Adding this is a completely new layer of the game. So we look at it, what it's going to do is think about whatever the gem used to do, but it's slightly weaker and now has a new effect. So for instance, I think a good example would be like an aquamarine. If we look at an aquamarine, well, what does it do when we put it in? So the rune glass version, it still converts damage to whatever it would have been, but now it also inflicts an 8% dot of whatever you'd like to pick. It can be fire, it could be ice, it could be nature, and some of them. But now there's also options. For instance, you get that one's arcane, but there's some, okay, now I get stamina back on successful hit. Okay, now I get leeching back on successful hit. And if you look at any of these, you also get an effect when it's in something like gear. So for this, if I put in a gear, I get 1 stam back with each successful hit plus that damage absorption. It's slightly lower, but it's still pretty high. Or even this, if I put in a nature one, okay, now all my nature attacks do an additional 2% damage. So if you're a mage, if you're anybody a high DPS, you're gonna wanna start loading these into your gear so you're just doing more damage. It's really interesting to see that it's kind of adding to the end game meta and adding a whole new layer to the system. How you get them with the rune glass and crafting them out in Brimstone. It's just nice to see. Okay, now this is kind of a smaller one, but if you haven't, there's a whole new trade skill on the topic of crafting and things like that. But you play instruments, there's a bunch of different ones and they can do different things, like give you increased territory standing gain, increased storage space, increase harvesting luck, increase movement speed, increase weapon skill XP. Lots of cool things. You can play different songs. You can get tipped for your songs. I can sit here and if you know what, you just want to play a Guitar Hero like kind of setup, you pick your song, you pick your instrument, it's on novice, we go here, and then boom, I start. And now when I'm done, people can tip me. But when I finish this, it's going to give us a territory standing gain. So it's a nice little mini game, but ultimately it gives you a really nice quality of life buff when you look at it, and there's all sorts of different ones to put out there. So it's just an enjoyable new piece of the game, adds to new crafting recipes, something new to do. But again, it shows the directionality of where things are headed when we start to put in a whole new trade skill that focuses on quality of life bonuses. If you want to rock around with increased movement speed or just farm extra territory standing, like if you think about my cooking videos, I used to show like, hey, here's how you're going to get 20 levels. Well, now what if we have a buff to give us even more? That's all I have to say on this because I just missed that. So, okay, so I know I kind of stressed this one in the beginning when I was talking about the questing experience, but all the zones are a little bit different. For instance, this is Everfall now. If you have a house in Everfall, you're gonna be like, all right, when did I get into George Washington time? Okay, the American Revolution sort of stuff. We're looking and it just, you start to see this, like, I don't know what they're planning to do with the game. I don't know if we're gonna start shifting towards like modern day. I don't know, but I think it's just really nice and refreshing to see a completely different town. So this is new Everfall. This is not what it used to look like, people. And then I think the biggest one to really show you what a difference is if you go to Monarch's Bluff, and I'll just keep talking while I'm loading through this. But from questing zones, and you'll see that in the intro clip, so I'm talking about that initially, to just seeing some of these different towns. You're like, all right, what's going on here? But then you start to notice, okay, I was questing here, or I remember questing here back in the day. Why is this so different? This is Monarch's Bluff now. This used to be we had a little secret castle over here, like a little secret tower. It wasn't a legit castle. You could get into there before, but this is a complete rework of the entire town. Yes, it looks a little bit similar, but if you start to look into it, you're like, wow, they actually added in a lot of detail here. So that's pretty much everywhere out in the world. You'll see something new, something refreshing. Okay, so this is a pretty big one for a lot of you, and maybe a reason why you even stopped playing New World in the first place. One, there's 2 new expeditions, so I'll clump this together. You have the Ennead and you have Barnacles and Black Powder. So completely new experiences. You might have seen it in my previous video. You can go ahead and just go through those. They're super fun, super unique, and just a good taste for the game. Next, they got rid of tuning orbs. So if you haven't, there are now chests in your storage containers everywhere. If you had any orbs, they turned every orb into a chest, whether it's a mutator orb, a specific expedition orb. You open it up, there's expedition specific loot in there, and then there's some crafting materials, umbrals, a lot of fun things. Next, there is the group finder, and I know a lot of people wanted this, but how does it work? You go through, you can simply request to join, and you tell them your role. When you tell them your role, it will give them your gear score, what weapons you have on when you signed up, and the level of said weapons. So you can do that. You can also create the lobbies if you want and put in minimum gear scores. I can be like, all right, whatever your average is right now, I have a weird weapon on. You can set that as the minimum level, and then say what you're looking for, and you can put in a description like, looking for big pumpers only. Okay, and then I want voice chat, and I'll select my role as a healer. And you can set up your group and wait for people to join. So it's just nicer, smoother, and easier to actually do PvE content now as well. Yeah, I don't care if anybody wants to come at me for this one, but this is personally my favorite and all-time best thing. I think going around to current legacy servers and seeing lower level people, or seeing new people, or just seeing people talk to each other in world chat. I sat there and I logged in the morning and I heard 2 guys talking. And one, it was an accidental hot mic of a guy whose daughters were singing him happy birthday. This guy walks up to him and says, "Hey, happy birthday, man." And he gives him like a bunch of gold, right? On a fresh start, return to Eternum sort of server. And you see brand new levels all the time. You see people asking questions about how to play the game. You see people getting trolled a little bit sometimes, but asking, "Hey, what's the best weapon?" or "What's this build?" or "Hey, I just returned to the game. Can somebody help me?" or "I'm looking for a new company and I'm 580 gear score." It warms my heart to see new people are actually returning to Eternum. There's people like that. They don't even have a faction, right? They're running around towns. And this is on Valhalla right now. You go into any fresh start server and you'll really see how many new people there are. And it is nice to be leveling and other people are leveling too. It's exciting. It just shows the future of New World is bright. And I'm happy to be here with all of you. So that's the end. I know that last one's a little cheesy, but I think the biggest thing in all of returning to New World is the amount of new people, the amount of people trying to learn, and ultimately the community talking to each other and having fun. And that's what New World's about. So as always, I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope this gave you some insight, maybe even helped you return. Ooh, heard that. Maybe even helped you return. Please do the weird YouTube stuff, like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, tell everybody you know. I'd really appreciate it. Hit the links down below. And if you need anything, feel free to join the Discord. Send me a message. And if you want to submit some clips, hit the Google form down below. But as always, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And thank you to every single one of you beautiful people for being you. Peace.